So welcome to the podcast, Pat Divilly. Pat, how you doing?
I'm great, Will. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to get in front of a new audience and hopefully share some ideas and inspiration.
Well, I'm sure we're gonna be able to do exactly that. So I think you're an incredible individual. We got introduced by Alex. So quick shout out to Alex about a year or so ago, and connected on social media as you do, and sort of been following what you've been up to. I think it's weird when you say I've been following you. It sounds like you've got some sort of weird stalker, but been following what you've been up to, and you really are up to some incredible stuff. So you're obviously based over in Ireland, but you don't only operate over in Ireland now. You're starting to venture out. I know you're doing some stuff in sort of the Middle East and also over here in the UK, which we'll touch on in due course. But ultimately, you're a high performance coach now.
Yeah.
I'm right in saying a lot of sort of stuff that you've done in the past has been sort of around nutrition and training, and that's evolved now a lot into the mindset side of things. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of been a natural progression over the last couple of years, coming from a fitness background, which we'll get into, and then being offered a few talks. And it's funny, you say yes to opportunities, and a couple of years later, you find yourself in a very different position. But the fitness was the start of everything for me. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we talk about start of everything. I've had the privilege of meeting so many people in the personal development space, and that are in it for a reason. And for a lot of those people, there's normally a story that comes with it. I'm yet to meet anyone that works as a coach or a mentor or working in the personal development, professional development space that said, yeah, from the moment I was 5 years old, I knew that's what I want to be when I grow up. I just knew I wanted to be that. I haven't met anyone yet. So I know that your story is incredibly powerful and inspirational. So if you'd be kind enough to share with our listeners the sort of how you got to the point of working as a high performance coach now, that'd be incredible.
Sure. Funny we talk about like personal development and people taking it on from an early age. I actually got into it really young. The Anthony Robbins of the world, the Zig Ziglars, the Brian Tracy's, all these kind of guys. But I found personal development, I found fitness when I was in my early teens. And it was something that I think it was the first thing in life that gave me confidence when I started going to the gym. And I decided at 14, this is what I want to do. That's what I pursued after school. I came out of college, actually went to England and did a year of a master's out there in exercise and nutrition science. And then just as timing would have it, I came out of college at the worst of the recession in Ireland. So we'd gone from the Celtic Tiger, where we were taking over the world, to things being pretty dark and bleak back here. And I had these dreams and aspirations of being a fitness trainer. Again, all I ever wanted to do. Now I was armed with a master's in nutrition. I thought this is going to be an easy road. And at 23, I moved from Galway, where I live, up to Dublin, to the capital city. And I had these aspirations of becoming somebody, whatever that meant. And in retrospect, that stemmed from a lack of confidence in myself, a sort of always feeling a little bit like an outsider and someone who didn't fit in. I think from being bullied a bit when I was younger. And I told myself this story that if I achieve external success, eventually I'll come to believe in myself. So as a young guy with ego that went to Dublin, not ego in the sense of a cocky guy, but someone that just wanted to become somebody and wanted people to, I suppose, see me as being special. I wanted that significance that comes from a lack of self-esteem. So I moved to Dublin. I worked in the gym initially and then went out on my own. And it was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Just getting clients, trying to figure out how to run a business, trying to build a network in a big city where I didn't know anyone. But I was too stubborn to come home with my tail between my legs. And so I kind of continued to struggle up there for 18 months, borrowing money from anyone I could to pay the rents, working odd jobs and in clothes shops and doing all sorts of jobs to keep the dream alive. And I think I painted a very different picture on social media to reality. I would post pictures of models that I was training. And my friends would see these pictures and think that I'd made it, when in reality, I was actually training all the models up there for free in the hope that they'd get me in the media. So the reality of the situation was I was struggling to pay my rent. I was struggling with my mental health. I was lost. I didn't know where I was going. I was struggling with the fact that everyone had told me this wasn't going to work. And now I was seeing the real world evidence that it wasn't going to work. But again, I didn't want to come home. I didn't want to accept defeat and failure. I didn't want to leave my dream behind. Eventually, after 18 months of struggle, I found myself again working in the clothes shop on Christmas Eve and getting a phone call from my dad asking when I was coming home to see my family. And I broke down in tears in the middle of the shop. and had to tell my dad on the phone, who's the guy I want to impress the most, that I couldn't afford the bus home. And the bus was €12 to give people context. And that's how broke I was at the time. And, my dad told me, I'll send you through the €12 you need, just get yourself home and we'll figure this out. And I remember getting that bus home from the capital to my hometown. That's the bus where you meet everybody that you grew up with. So there was old friends, there was people that I recognized from home, from my childhood. And they would have all been on that bus. And I just cried for 3 hours on a bus home, thinking of what a failure I was. And just feeling shame. In retrospect, I felt a lot of shame that I wasn't a rags to riches story, because a lot of people had always supported me. My family had put me through college, all this kind of stuff. And I think I felt shame around the fact that despite the opportunities I've been given, I hadn't been successful. And, people ask me now, why at 24 did you have such high expectations of yourself? And can you not see that 24-year-olds are not supposed to have it all figured out? But at that time, my belief was I'm supposed to be successful, and I wasn't. So I moved back in with my parents. I got work in a local pizza shop. I spent 6 months completely lost. I was, walking around my local village for hours every day, just looking for hope, looking for a way out, looking for any light at the end of the tunnel. And, I would meet people from the local village that would say, Pat, I thought you were, a successful trainer in Dublin. And I'd wipe back tears and pretend I was okay and just tell them, I was kind of contemplating my next move. And it was a very low point in my life. I was completely lost. And around that time, I think there was something that stemmed in me, or some spark that was lit that said, if other people are doing this, there must be a way. And I contacted some trainers over in the UK that I was following on Facebook. We talk about the problems with social media, but it does provide inspiration if you're looking in the right places. And I contacted a bunch of trainers. I said, you're doing really well. I'd love to know how you're doing it. I'd love to think I could do the same. And one guy got back to me who was someone I didn't know. Well, I knew him from a distance, but he didn't know who I was. And he said to me, give me your phone number and I'll give you a call later on. And I remember in my head thinking at that time, this guy must be rich. He's ringing me from Wales. Like, that's how poor I was. And this guy, Mark Tregilges, rang me up, and he was just so full of energy. And in retrospect, didn't tell me anything I didn't know, but gave me a bit of hope and a bit of belief that I didn't have. And he said, you should start teaching outdoor classes. You don't need money for rent. It's a different kind of business. Focus on community, bring people together, get them moving. You can do this. And that one conversation just gave me a little bit of hope, from a guy that was completely lost. And I decided to give it a go one more time, and started teaching classes with 5 clients on the local beach. And, I made my whole focus, my whole intention about making the people in front of me feel special for the 45 minutes they were with me. Because when I was in Dublin, I was your standard personal trainer that stood beside the client and counted reps and, told them about sit-ups and broccoli. And I just had no context of what it's like to struggle in life. And having struggled now with my mental health and just with feeling lost, I started thinking, well, surely other people feel the same way. And I can be a little bit of hope in their day, the same way Mark was a little bit of hope in my day when he rang me. And that sort of became the culture of my little class. And so the class went from 5 clients to 100 in 3 months. And over time, my life completely changed.
And you say, to put that into context, so now how many people is it you impact every month? I mean, it's grown dramatically from those 5 people, right?
Yeah. It's been an incredible couple of years. It went from 5 clients to 100 locally on the beach in 3 months. And then within a year, it was 500 clients, and opened my first facility, brought out my first book. And then in the course of 5 years, with every struggle, there's an opportunity. And one of the struggles for me was a lot of my friends had immigrated because of how bad the recession was. But the opportunity there was people outside of Ireland started asking, how do I get involved in this thing? And I put my programs online, and now 25,000 clients have gone through my online programs. So, I've written a couple of books. We've raised $250,000 for charities. A lot has happened in a couple of years, and that was the fitness chapter of my life. And that's kind of opened me up to lots of opportunities, which I'm grateful for. But, one thing I would say, as you say, that sometimes people look to someone who's a couple of steps ahead and think I could never do that. That's where I was when I was in Dublin. I was thinking about how do I get 100 clients before I thought about how do I get my first client. And I think sometimes we make that mistake where it's great to compare yourself to people that inspire you. But it's also important to recognize that the journey is never as straightforward as it looks from the outside looking in. And so there was a lot of hardship, there was a lot of struggle. And then when I started building this thing, there was a lot of work that went into it. And,
Yeah, I bet.
I think just enjoying the journey and taking it day by day has been a big change for me over the years.
It's one of the things. I mean, there's so many nuggets there which I've made notes on, and we're gonna delve into. But just to lead with the latter point you've just mentioned there, I made the exact same mistake. I'm schooled in NLP, and NLP, I'm sure you're familiar with, is based around modeling others. And I was looking at the people that were at the top of their game, and I was like, well, I just need to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
But forgetting that when they were at the position that I was in, they did something different at my point, So yes, modeling is beneficial, but modeling people that are at chapter 20 when you're at chapter 2 is very different. And learning what they're doing at the point that's right for you is really, really important. I think that's powerful. There was something that I've heard from you in the past, where you spoke about. Well, in fact, let's go further back. So you went back to a point, obviously, the time for you when it was Christmas Eve, you couldn't get the journey home. You mentioned shame. There was a massive amount of shame. I know that you couldn't even buy your mum a Christmas present, or you wasn't in a position to buy your mum a Christmas present, which I know I've heard you say before was something that was tough for you as well. And I can empathize with that for sure. In terms of accepting the defeat, you said I accepted defeat. When you were sort of accepting defeat, what was it that you were accepting specifically?
Well, my mum's birthday is actually Christmas Day, and that was it was the birthday present that threw me, I think, more than anything, because my little brother at the time was 11, and I laugh and I joke about it now and say at 11 he had more money in the bank than I did. And I just didn't feel like a good role model, a good example. But accepting defeat, I think, was, again, everyone had sort of said to me, it's not possible. You can't make a living from fitness in Ireland. There's been a big fitness trend the last 10 years. But at that point, which is about 10 years ago now, or 8 years ago now, there wasn't people making a living. People were working in gyms and getting by. But people were not making a comfortable living. And defeat to me was just throwing in the towel and sort of saying, well, I better go and get a quote unquote real job. I applied to go back and study physiotherapy at that time, because that was a kind of happy middle ground of still get to work with people in a helpful way. It's still about physical movement, but it's a more secure job and it's a real job. And so got accepted onto a course in England. I thought, this is my way out. This is my light at the end of the tunnel. And then that course fell through. And that was the moment when I said, right, let's try the fitness thing one last chance. I've got nothing to lose at this point. I often say people come from a place of desperation or inspiration. Inspiration being, I'm so inspired from within and I want to do this thing. And then on the flip side is desperation, where things are so bad that you've got to do something to make a change. And it's almost a blessing to get to that point in retrospect, because you're shaken to the point that you have to do something different. And I think at that point I recognized my way is not working. Let's go back to the drawing board and learn from the people. As you say, with NLP, it's about modeling. I had read the self-help books since I was 12 or 13, but I had never applied. I had never applied the ideas. I was more concerned with getting through the books than I was actually practicing the ideas.
Wow,
and
yeah.
At that point where everything's gone, you start thinking, well, the books say to set a goal, and the books say to break it down to the smallest step. And the books say you don't need the perfect plan, you just need to act on what you know. And, I think a combination of putting those practices into place and also a combination of accepting where I was, because a lot of us don't accept where we are. We fight with where we are. We think there's something wrong with where we are. We again, shame is something that keeps us stuck. When I said, look, I am where I am. I'm not where I want to be. But if I can move from the place where I am, I can get a step ahead.
No, I absolutely love that. I really, really do. Where do you think? So you said that you mentioned that people used to say to you at 24, like you're supposed to just live like, obviously other people's values and their projections that they're putting on you of how life should be for a 24-year-old. Where do you think that drive did come from? I mean, because picking up personal development books at any age is rare for most people. You were doing it from your early teens. So where do you think that drive for success, like you say, in inverted commas came from?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I think partially it was that whole insecurity that I felt as a young guy. I was bullied a little bit as a kid, and obviously those seeds that are planted in your early years become the beliefs that you have. And one of my beliefs was I'm not good enough, and you know, we all have that to some degree. But that kept coming up throughout my life. Even when I'd meet friends, I'd have it in the back of my head that someday they'll find out what I'm really like and they won't like me. And I always struggled a bit with that. And I think I had this story internally that successful people fit in, and you know, people believe in them. And there was this story in my mind that if I succeed, other people will believe in me, and then in time I'll come to believe in myself. Ironically, I learned with that whole thing was that the more I succeeded without doing the work on myself, the more of a magnifying glass it almost put on my insecurities. But it was a combination of that, and also I know you've done some stuff with John DeMartini, and John talks about the value system. And I just always had a value on personal development for some reason. It energizes me to read about that stuff. It energizes me to write down goals. And it's just one of the highest values for me. So I don't know where it came from. It's been a blessing and a curse at times. And of course, with personal development, sometimes you think, you know, would it be easier if I just sat back and coasted along? But then one of my big beliefs in life is if you do what is easy in life, life is hard. If you do what is hard, life is a bit easier. And so I think by putting a little bit of struggle, a little bit of push, a little bit of discomfort into your life every day, everything else tends to take care of itself. So that's kind of been my way of living.
For sure. You've got an option. You can choose short-term pain for long-term gain, or short-term gain for long-term pain. You know, you've got your option there for sure. I wholeheartedly agree. In terms of, because you mentioned people not thinking that they're good enough. And I think it's an epidemic at the moment, you know, and social media, like you've mentioned, yeah, it's great for so many things. I love using social media, but I even catch myself from time to time comparing myself on social media and the impact that can have. And I think of myself as a very aware person, obviously always looking to become more aware. I'm not saying that I don't have flaws, I have plenty, but I'm doing my best to progress and move forward. What advice would you give anyone that's listening to this right now that is maybe at the point where you were 10 years ago or even before that, that is thinking that they're not good enough and have maybe started on that path of, I'm going to achieve to win other people over? What advice would you give to people in that situation?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I think number one, you got to be honest about what you want, and that requires space. So oftentimes we're moving so fast in life that we're just kind of assuming that what other people have is what we want. We assume that success is what we see externally. And Tony Robbins says something to the effect of, you know, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And I've experienced that as well, where I move at a very fast pace. I look around me, this guy's got that car, this guy's got this as a success metric. That must be success, having never consulted with myself as to what success would be. And then you chase the thing and you chase the thing and maybe you achieve it, but then you feel a little bit empty when you get there. So number one, I would say be very honest with yourself about what you want from life. And that requires creating space, which could be you getting pen and paper and allowing yourself that chance to dream on paper and disconnect from what you've seen growing up, disconnect from what you see around you, because we've all got a unique part to play in this planet. We've all got different ambitions and dreams and hopes and aspirations. They might tie back to similar themes, but there's different things that light us up. DeMartini's value system is a great way of starting to get clear on what you really like and what really energizes you. That will be one thing. Another thing will be, as you say, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. Definitely take inspiration from other people, audit who you're following, who you're looking at, who you're comparing yourself to. But, you know, one thing I've learned, it's a little bit of a cliche, but never compare your internal reality to other people's external picture of what they're putting out there. I use this analogy of the house, where if you pull back the walls here in my house to do some plumbing work, it looks pretty ugly behind the walls. It looks nice and pretty when the wall is covering up everything else. But when the tradesman comes around and he's doing some work on the house, you say, wow, I didn't realize my house looked like that behind the wall. And it's kind of the same. Like, I see a famous athlete and everything looks perfect. That athlete no doubt struggles with self-doubt and worry and overwhelm and burnout and all these things that I do as well. And so I shouldn't compare what I see externally to what I feel internally. We all have struggles. We all have self-doubt. We all have insecurities. And so the only person I should ever compare myself to is who I was yesterday. I tell a story about this where I recently took up surfing, and it was something for 10 years I had talked about surfing and how I want to go surfing. And I would always compare myself to people that have been doing it since they were kids. And I'd say, I'm too old. I'm this, that, the other. And eventually I went and I did my first surf lesson, and a friend of mine said, oh, my best friend's a professional surfer too. And I said, hold on a second, it's my first lesson. I'm not a professional surfer, but in her mind, it was the same thing. My first surf lesson, I turned up, they said, there's 2 groups, you can go whichever group you want. There was a hen party and there was a 10-year-old birthday party. And I said, oh God, here we go. And I went with the 10-year-old birthday party. After first going with the hen party, I changed my mind. And for 2 hours, I struggled to get up on the surfboard. I got sunburned in Ireland somehow, and I felt like an idiot for 2 hours. But I drove home and I was so happy in my own skin, because I felt like an ounce of action is worth a ton of thinking about doing something. And the lesson in that was, me on the couch for 10 years thinking about surfing is one thing. Me doing my first surf lesson, even if it's ugly compared to anyone else, is a million miles ahead of where I was. And that's how you become good at something. A lot of us say, I'm not good at X, Y, or Z. And you would ask that person, how often have you done it? And they'll say, well, I've never done it because I'm not good at it. And the reality of anything is practice is required. If I want to be a good speaker, if I want to be a good communicator, if I want to be good at relationships, if I want to be good in the gym, the only difference between me and someone else, this is my biggest belief in life, and it comes back to the modeling piece. Only difference between me and anyone else in any skill set is the amount of time that's been put into the skill set. And so I encourage people to, just allow yourself to commit a certain amount of hours a week to whatever you want to get good at, and don't have any expectation on yourself apart from completing the hours to the best of your ability. And if you do that for long enough, you can master anything.
Love that. Absolutely love that. You mentioned and it's obviously very prevalent right now, is you mentioned one of the things that you'd struggle with at points was with your mental health as well. I mean, do you class that I'm not good enough and that self-fulfilling prophecy as sort of the struggles with your mental health, or was there more extreme elements of your mental health challenges as well?
There's been different things. I mean, I struggled with anxiety, I suppose general anxiety disorders, since my early teens or my mid-teens. And for a long time, I didn't know what it was. I just didn't know how to express that emotion that was in me. I didn't have tools in place for it. So I struggled with that, at times, and I still do. I mean, one of the things that I try to be clear with people on is, before I learned any of the personal development stuff, I was anxious and I was a little bit insecure and I was all these things. And I'm still anxious and a little bit insecure and all of those things. The only difference is how quick I bounce back now. So when I struggle with anxiety now, I've got my meditation, I've got my breath work, I've got my journal, I've got time in nature, I've got all these tools. And so I just bounce back a little bit quicker. So there's no magic pill, there's no quick fix, there's nothing like that. But yeah, I've struggled with that, where everything externally can be perfect on paper, but I feel quite overwhelmed or a little bit lost internally. That time when I look back, at 24, all the stress and depression came from the story of where I should be and the disconnect as to reality. And this is the case for a lot of people. I'm a big fan of Byron Katie's work, where he says that, stress in life is an expectation. It's a story about how things should be. And if you could accept how things are, you let go of that stress. And so again, my stress when I look back at 24 was, I should be successful. The only thing causing any struggle for me was the thought of I should be successful. And when I was able to say, I am where I am, let's move from here, that made a difference. And another little struggle, another big struggle I had a couple of years into the fitness business was, we all had this story of I'll be happy when. And for me, it was, I'll be happy when I have a business, I'll be happy when I have a house, I'll be happy when I have a car, I'll be happy. And I would push the needle out all the time. What's next? What's next? What's next? And at 27, when on paper, I was probably very, very successful, then I had another kind of dip where I said, I'm not feeling fulfilled anymore. How do I have all the things and I'm not happy day to day? And that was another turning point for me, where I went back to the drawing board. And I think I found a nice balance there of going after goals, but also ensuring I was enjoying the day to day, because sometimes we get lost in the goals. I think it's important that you have targets, you have goals, you have a plan to some degree, but I also think it's very important that there's day-to-day practices that ensure that you're not waiting for the weekend, not waiting for the next holiday, but you're enjoying the journey as much as possible. And to me, that's things like jiu-jitsu, the surfing, the rock climbing. They're as important to me as any goal will be. Daily practices, I think, is really, really important.
I completely agree, and we're going to touch onto what some of your daily practices are. I know you've mentioned a couple of them, but I've heard you in the past. You talk about sort of three different spaces. You talk about you have sort of your workspace, your personal space, then you have another space.
Yeah.
And for you, the beach once upon a time was that space. Is the beach still that space for you, or is that space evolved now?
Yeah, I would say it's evolved. So I think I actually read that in a business book years ago. It was the Starbucks experience, and they talked about how Starbucks became this incredible business. And what Starbucks recognized was people have their home life, and then they have their work life, and then they typically have a third place where they go. And people that came to Starbucks, they wanted that to be the best part of their day, where they write your name on a cup of coffee and suddenly they can charge 3 times as much for the coffee. So it was a clever business model. For some people, the third space is going to the pub and getting hammered drunk, and that's their escape from the stresses in other areas of life. For other people, it's the bookies, unfortunately. For other people, it's the library. We've all got a third space, and it's where you disconnect. It's where you connect with yourself, maybe. For me, with the beach, that was what I was trying to create, where 100 people come to the beach and they can forget about the stresses of life and the stresses of home, and they can be acknowledged for their mini wins, where they can build confidence. I always said, growing up, I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach that worked with elite level athletes. And then the first time I trained like a working mom and she would do her first push-up, I said, wow, this is fulfilling. Like to see someone light up from doing something so simple. She's gone home to her family, a different woman now. She's a different wife. She's a different mother. She remembers who she is. Because as we get older, sometimes we lose who we are. We think that work is everything and family is everything. And we forget that we have to fill ourselves up first. And same for me now, as I've grown a business, as I've become a personality in some respects to people that come to my seminars. If I don't do my daily practices and I don't have my third space separate to all of that, very hard for me to fill from an empty cup. So jiu-jitsu is one of my places now. That's a big thing for me. Education is another one of my third places, but yeah, it's essential. I think it's a big thing for people. I often work with clients that say they're really discontent in work and they assume that changing the work is the first port of call. And I'll often tell them, if you can find a hobby on the side that you do once or twice a week, that will change your attitude to work, to life, to all different aspects. And then you can maybe be a different person going into work. And you may not need to make that drastic change. You might just need a little practice that you add to your week to escape for a little time.
No, I love that. It's funny, yours was the beach and mine is running water. And I say running water, literally running by water. So I go running out by where I live, and there's sort of a perfect little 5K that runs all along the river. And I work literally outside the window right here. We've got a river running by. My parents' house growing up literally used to back onto a river. Even if I'm traveling, I'm speaking and I'm staying overnight somewhere, I'll find myself running to water. And there's just something about being out by water. And I did actually look into a bit of the science behind this before. I don't know if you've ever looked into the science of it, but it's to do with negative ions, which is quite interesting, particularly around running water. But that's a bit more to delve into another day. So we mentioned daily habits. Obviously, you've mentioned your third space now comprised of a few different things, your jiu-jitsu, so on and so forth. What are some? Let's start with your morning routine. Do you have a morning routine of things you do from the moment you wake up?
I've had a funny kind of is evolution. I don't know, is evolution the word? When I was completely lost and I started growing a business, I was very heavy on reading books, on taking on ideas, on being very, very structured. And my morning routine was a long list of things that I would do. And then I think when everything was very, very structured, I felt a little bit overwhelmed at times. And so I almost went the opposite way, and it was very go with the flow then. And I think I found a kind of happy medium now. With the morning routine, I tend to just get up, drink a liter of water, get in a cold shower, answer a couple of journaling questions, and that's me done. And the idea is I don't want to feel like a failure in the morning. And one of the ways I'll feel like a failure is having a list of 10 things to do in the morning and only achieving a few of them. So if I can start with 2 or 3 things, if I do more than that, great, but 2 or 3 is my starting point. And I reference, fitness clients as an example. The fitness client who wants to eat perfectly all the time will feel like they've made a mess of the plan if they've one bad meal or one cheat meal or whatever you call it. The person who says, I'm going to have a healthy breakfast, builds a bit of positive momentum, and then they're more likely to have a good lunch. And then they've done 2 out of 3, they might as well have a healthy dinner. So ironically, sometimes lowering the expectation on ourselves can help develop momentum. And again, back to Pat, when he was 24 in Dublin, the expectation was so high that it was impossible to reach those heights. And so by never reaching my goals, I never built confidence. And so again, it comes back to that piece of where am I? How could I be a step ahead of where I am? And once I get that step ahead, that's where the confidence comes from. It's in that growth that we find confidence. But if the bar is too high, it's very hard to take that step. So morning routine, I take out my journal. I have a couple of what I would call power questions, which is about focusing my mind on things that are important. So simple things. What are my priorities today? What am I grateful for today? And another one I've added recently, what am I most excited about today? Which has been
I love that. Yeah.
Because again, the person who's, struggling in life is only seeing what's not working. And that simple question, what am I excited about today? The answer could be nothing, and then that's an opportunity to put something in there. But we need excitement, we need passion, we need purpose. And so, something else I'm encouraging clients recently is to ask them, what is the feeling that you want to cultivate the most in life? And mine is probably calm. And so I'll ask the question in the morning, how could I cultivate calm today? Very simple question, but it kind of focuses my attention. And then I drink my water, have my cold shower, and I'm good to go.
I love that. Those questions. So I was going to ask you specifically, how do you journal? But you've answered the question already, so thank you. Those key questions. How do I cultivate insert feeling of whatever it is that people want to, whatever it is that they want to journal to just answer and have a bit of time for themselves.
Something I tell people on that, Will, is that like any goal that we're trying to achieve is ultimately for a feeling. Like the person that wants to lose weight feels that they will be confident when they achieve that. And so my goal when I was a personal trainer was I would ask the client, what do you want to feel when you lose the 2 stone? Or how do you think you will feel? And they would say confident. And then I'd ask them, what makes you feel confident at the moment? And they might say, when I get my hair done. And then I'd say, I'd encourage you to get your hair done in the next week, along with the 3 workouts, because my idea was that if we can cultivate the feeling that you want as early as possible in the journey, you're more likely to make it to week 2. But if I have the story that I've got to train for 12 weeks and then confidence is at the end of the 12 weeks, it's very hard to stay consistent with that thing. So what do I feel the goal will give me? And then how can I bring that into my life on a daily basis rather than wait?
Yeah, I think that's really, really effective. And I love that way of doing things. I talk about, which is what you've just shared. We were just talking about unlock your potential before we start recording. And sort of the majority of people that live in the do, have, be. So they're going to do something, then have something, then be something. So I'm going to do loads of work, I'll have loads of money, then I'll be happy, rather than living in be, do, have. Now, that it doesn't mean you don't do those things. It doesn't mean you don't have the outcome still, but the place you're doing it from is different. Yes. And that's exactly what you've just said there. Who are some personal heroes of yours from the past and now, past and present?
From the past, I'm a lifelong learner and I'm an avid learner. So I'm so open to learning from so many different places. I mean, obviously Tony Robbins and guys like that have been a big influence on my personal development work. Jack Canfield. There's been so many. I'm into all the personal development gurus, but ironically, I would say my dad is probably the one who's challenged me the most in my late teens, early 20s. But he's the guy that I look to now as being someone who, as much as I hate to admit it, he had a lot of things right. When I was in Dublin trying to become somebody, his thing was just keep the head down, work hard, focus on the basics, stop trying to become well known and just become good at what you do. He taught me all those things years ago, but you only hear it when you're ready to hear it. And for me, failure was necessary to hear it. So, the older I get, the more I relate to him and I resonate with him and I respect him just for the simple way he lives and kind of his family values, his no nonsense approach, and just the fact he gets on with it.
Love that. I'm right in saying Arnie was Arnie Schwarzenegger was a hero at some point in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Probably. I don't know where you read that, but that's true. Growing up, like I say, I found the gym early on and being bullied a bit as a kid, I suppose you look to these superhero-like characters, and that guy's just incredible in terms of what he did with, if you want to call it the law of attraction. It's a guy that came from a small town and became a famous bodybuilder, and then he took over the movie industry when people laughed at his accent and took him as a laughing stock. Then he became the highest paid actor in Hollywood, and then he went into politics. He kind of turns his hand to anything. So that's impressive and that's inspiring. I read his book years ago and I thought it was yeah, probably the best autobiography I've read.
What is it about? Obviously, you mentioned the law of attraction and how he sort of he's applied. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and I'm going to do X, and then I'm going to get X type thing. What is it that you've been able? Let's take a seat with the law of attraction. Actually, are you a believer in the law of attraction? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, look, as they say, paired with action, the law of attraction is definitely useful. The way I look at things, you're planting seeds in your mind all the time, and then every day your actions water those seeds, and over time, you see the manifestation of whatever it is. So, you know, in my younger years, I think I was planting negative seeds, and then I was feeding them. So I thought people don't like me, and I'm not cool, and then I would look for evidence that backed that up every day. Mm-hmm. And obviously you act in accordance to your beliefs. So when I would go into social settings, I would be standoffish and I would not be able to make eye contact because my belief was people don't like me. And then the manifestation of that didn't really improve my social interactions, and it backed up my belief. And, you know, the law of attraction then on the flip side is, you know, when I think about, okay, well, I want to be a powerful communicator. Then I start thinking, what does a powerful communicator do? I start putting that into effect. You know, as they say, law of attraction without action is delusion, probably. But if I act upon the thoughts and the things that I'm trying to work towards, it's powerful. There was a couple of years ago, I'm sure you know your listeners are familiar with the vision board. I put together a mind movie, which is a similar concept of videos, images, quotations that inspire you and kind of bring out emotions in you. And one of my things was I was just getting into public speaking, and I put in a clip saying I want to be a powerful public speaker. And the clip that I used was of Gary Vaynerchuk. And 2 years later, Gary came to Dublin. He filled 1,000 people in a room in Dublin, and I was his supporting. I was the guy that spoke before him. And it was only looking back at that video a year later that I said, "Wow, that was the clip that I used." So definitely planting the seeds. You never know what's going to happen.
You never. The power of what can be applied when we don't have the guilt and the shame, and we're operating that high level of a higher level of energy is so powerful. When you're a personal trainer, so on these topics, I'm curious to learn. So I love learning the whys, and I love learning the hows, not only the whys and the hows of how people got to certain points. When you were a PT and you moved to Dublin, so just as you were sort of turning up in Dublin, what was your goal then out of interest?
I wanted media exposure.
So you wanted media exposure. What else?
I wanted financial freedom. I wanted, you know, I wanted people to know who I was. I think that was the main thing. That was
three things.
It was more about me than it was the clients in retrospect, you know, and that again was from a guy that was just not secure in his own. Now I'm almost the opposite, you know, like we just filmed a documentary in January on the talks, and it's going to be in the film festivals, and I'll almost not want to go to the premiere because like I don't want to be the center of attention anymore. But back then that was what I wanted. Now I'm fulfilled by the work that I do, and so I don't need that. I would almost compare it to, you know, people buy a lot of stuff that they don't need when they're in a job that they don't like because it fills some void for them. Whereas I find when you're doing work that you enjoy and you've got some hobbies there, you don't really need to buy the stuff, and you're not as consumer based. And in the same way for me, when I found fulfillment in my work, becoming known didn't matter to me anymore because I was enjoying my day to day. I didn't need anything external because I was filling myself up from within, I think.
So powerful. And I'm going to come back to this, which is really interesting, but I was exactly the same. I mean, when I wanted to get into personal development, so as I've shared on previous episodes, I had what I call my lightning moment, and I was at UPW, so Unleash the Power Within, Tony's event back in 2013, crying my eyes out in the moment that I heard him share the Thanksgiving story. And I realized that in that moment, my belief that money equaled happiness wasn't what it was really about. It was much deeper. It was to do with my dad and my mum and a whole host of other stuff. And I decided in that moment, I wanted to become the world's best life coach. And that was what I said I wanted to do. And for about a year or two up until that point, I was still saying that. And then I had a guy called Harry Singer who I had a coaching session with, and he was like, "That's not your purpose." And then it was when I did my NLP practitioner course, my first practitioner course, I realized that actually, no, it wasn't about me being the world's best life coach. It was what was the impact that I could have. And yeah, it makes a big difference when you flip it around and you realize that you're coming from that place. It's about other people rather than you. So I can completely empathize with where you're at in that respect. I think what's really interesting, so again, you talk about intention, setting an intention with the law of attraction. If you set your intention, one of the things that we don't get to control is how stuff happens, right? You know, if we have the intention, you kind of set the intention, have the strong desire, but then almost let go to a degree of how that comes about. And you wanted media attention, you wanted to make a difference, and you wanted to do those things. And 5 years later, well, it's more than 5 years later now, right? How many years has it been since that?
8 years now. Since
8 years.
Time is, it's like a time vortex. It's just been so fast paced and so much has happened. But yeah, you know, something I tell people recently, because the question in seminars, there's a million questions in seminars, but someone did ask recently, I'm thinking positive, I'm doing my affirmations, why do I not feel more positive? And this is a certain amount of it has to be trust. And the trust is that you plant the seeds and you don't go into the garden and shout at the ground because the tree's not coming up as quick as you want. You just keep watering the plant. And then when you least expect it, you know, I've had tipping points where, you know, those first couple of months of growing this business, I was doing everything. I was putting healthy menus in every restaurant in town where I would go into them. I would take their menu, take all the healthy stuff and modify their menu and say, hey, I printed out new menus for you so your clients can have healthy meals. And then I would go to the local health shops, put up posters. Then I would write articles in the newspapers. I would do all these things and nothing was happening. And then, you know, in the space of 2 weeks, suddenly there was a kind of tipping point where people started coming to the classes and saying, I have to join your gym because I can't ignore you anymore. You're everywhere.
But even your first boot camp you did, I'm right in saying that first boot camp you did on the beach, you didn't just put a post on social media and people came along. You sent 5,000 leaflets out for 5 people to turn up. Is that right?
Yeah, 5,000 and you know, 5,000 flyers. I dropped them into beauticians and hairdressers. I was going to places where I felt there was a lot of women that would be my ideal audience, and I felt the women would be speaking in these hairdressers, and I thought that was a good strategy. But for me to get 5 clients completely changed my life. And again, that's a very different guy to the guy the year before that wanted 100. I thought, wow, 5 people believe in me. This is incredible. And the backstory, even before the 5 people, which I've only again seen recently, because sometimes you only see the dots when you look back, how they connect. But when I was completely lost and completely just not knowing what I was doing with my life, my dad said to me, and it was a little bit blunt probably, but he said, the reason you're so depressed is because you're self-obsessed at the moment and you're only thinking about yourself and you're convinced that you're the only one in the world with problems. And he said, go and help people and it's going to get you out of your own head. And so I started doing free training and nutrition plans. This was before the beach. And when I was working in the pizza shop, I would meet people on my break. I would give them a plan. I would write it out for them, just get them to buy me a coffee. And a guy contacted me 12 weeks after getting his plan. And he said, here's my before and after picture. You didn't ask for it, but I'm happy to share it with you. And that was probably what got those 5 clients as opposed to the flyers. And, you know, it's funny, again, just putting it out there and trying to help people. We talk about the morning routine and the morning questions. My 2 evening questions, you know, again, Tony Robbins, back to Tony a lot of the time, but Tony talks about growth and contribution and how essential they are. I ask myself 2 questions in the evening. And if anyone listening to this was to take one thing and they wanted a simple strategy, I ask myself, how did I grow today? Or what did I learn? And then the second question is, who did I positively impact today? And that's a kind of simple tool for a little bit more fulfillment.
Love that. So those two evening questions, and when you ask those questions, I'm curious for you, Pat, what do you get by when you answer those questions and you journal them? I'm guessing of an evening. What feelings does that cultivate for you?
You know, it's just that it's almost like an accountability and a sort of honesty piece for me, where there's days where I get caught up in my own bullshit and I get busy and I think checking my emails is the most important thing in the world. And then I reflect on that. Who did I positively impact today? And if I'm humming and hawing, I'm putting something down for the sake of it, I'm being honest with myself there. I'm like, okay, well, maybe you got caught up in the busyness and you didn't actually consciously make a positive impact on someone's life. It's easy for me to say, well, I released a podcast, so that's my piece. But I'm trying to be a bit more human in terms of like, did I actually do something. So like I've just come from the post office. I posted a binder full of notes to a friend of mine who's doing a master's that I did 10 years ago. And that's one little thing. So I've made a positive impact on him today. And it's just been a little effort. And it's just to keep myself accountable, I think. And as I say, learning is one of my highest values. So being able to answer that question of how did I grow today ensures that I'm not forgetting what's important.
Yeah, and both those questions as well. I'm sure if you're asking those every day, your reticular activated system is on the lookout every day of like, right, there's an opportunity there where I can impact someone. There's an opportunity where I can learn something. So you're priming yourself for the following day as well, right?
Yeah, you know what? Someone asked me recently. I was doing a podcast about failure, and she asked me, how do you feel when you don't achieve something that you wanted to achieve? What does that do to your psyche? And I says, I don't beat myself up in any way. I just look at it and I say cause and effect. If I don't achieve the thing I wanted to achieve, it's because I didn't do what was required. I'm not going to beat myself up about it because that doesn't do any help. Equally, I'm not going to blame anyone else because there's no point in that. Blame and shame. Shame is where I beat myself up. Blame is where I blame someone else. I'll just be very practical and say, well, this was the work that was required. I didn't do that work, so I don't get the result. And it's as simple as that. And then again, back to 24-year-old Pat, I wasn't putting in the work that was required to build a business. And so the shame was a waste of time because, you know, it's something, again, back to weight loss, because weight loss is a great example of setting a goal and having to do the work yourself. The person that says, you know, nothing works for me. I've tried everything and nothing works for me. I don't like seeing people see that. It's not because I'm trying to be harsh on that person. I'm trying to empower that person because it's not fair for them to tell themselves nothing works when they haven't actually done the work. They've done it for a week and then they've jumped onto something different and then they've jumped onto something different and they never stick with one plan. And then they tell themselves nothing works for me. I've tried everything. It completely disempowers them. It's important to be very honest. Okay, I've done this and I've gotten this. If I do something different, I'll get something different. Very simple, but again, hopefully it removes that story. Sometimes we fight for our limitations. You know, my big limitation in school, I'm not academic, I'm not clever, I'm not smart. And I told myself that 100 times a day when there was no truth to it. It was just a seed that I watered every day. So, if you're not where you want to be and you didn't get the results and you fell short on your goal, blame is a waste of time. Shame is a waste of time. Reflection is not a waste of time. Reflection is where you say, well, why did I struggle here? Took on too much. Okay, when I set goals going forward, don't take on so much. No point repeating the same cycle.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it can work the opposite way as well. I mean, I remember years ago, I used to say I'm never wrong, and I used to pride myself on the fact that I was never wrong. But and what happened is that also become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I was never wrong, and it become I'm never wrong. I'm never wrong. I'm never wrong. But the reason I was never wrong was because I never stepped out of my comfort zone. You know, I never pushed myself to what was possible. One of my biggest fears was public failure, you know, and cocking up publicly. And now I cock up publicly all the time, you know. I mean, my spelling is horrific. I love posting on social media. I love writing. My spelling's horrific, and there's typos and the stuff that goes out wrong. And it's one of those things. But like you say, if you're in action and you're taking action, you're much better taking action and sort of failing forward than sitting on your hands and doing nothing.
You know what? Facebook years ago brought me out to California to tell my story about growing my business, and I met Sheryl Sandberg and all this kind of stuff. And part of the reason they brought me out was because I'd grown this business where I had, I think 10,000 clients had gone through the program at this stage, and I didn't have a website. I literally everything was Facebook groups, and I didn't have a graphic designer. I had Word documents. Sometimes I didn't even have my own exercise videos. I was linking to videos on YouTube that other people had done with exercise demos. And everyone around me that was personal trainers were getting professional videographers in, and they were waiting for the perfect time to launch their plan. And I always told them, you've got to launch something imperfectly, because you are not going to find out how it works until you get it to market and you get the feedback. Because other times I've planned the perfect program in my mind, and then I've released week one and people have said there's way too much in this, like this is completely overwhelming. And then I'm back to the drawing board. So particularly with business ideas or anything else, put it out there. Don't be afraid to fail. As you say, seek feedback. Either, the world is going to give you feedback all the time, but I actively seek feedback. Like I did a men's event this past Saturday, first men's mental fitness day, 125 men. There's a lot of mental health problems in Ireland, a lot of male suicides. 75% of suicides here in Ireland are male. I've lost friends, and it's just, it's an epidemic at times. And I think part of that is the lack of purpose and losing track of, the growth, contribution, all these things. So I'm not claiming I'm going to cure the world, but I'm trying to do my piece. But one of the first things I've done after that event is email the guys and say, what did you hope to get from the event, and did you get that? And then the second question is, how can I make this better for future attendees? And please don't tell me that it was a perfect day, because I don't want that. That might be good for my ego, but it's not good for making this thing better.
Yeah.
I want to make this thing better. I'm not going to take it personal if you say you didn't enjoy certain aspects. That I want that.
That's what you want. Yeah. No, I get that for sure. In terms of a mantra, do you have like your own, what's sort of a I suppose affirmation that you live by, that regardless of what's going on, you just sort of run that through your head? Do you have anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think you've probably heard the story of the 20-mile march. Have you heard that story of the South Pole?
No, I haven't actually, no.
I'm not going to do it's justice with the telling of it, but there was a race to the South Pole years ago.
Yeah, actually, I think I might have, but yeah, go on.
So one of the last unexplored regions in the world, massive prestige comes with being the first team to get there. And there was two teams that took very different approaches through really hostile conditions. The first team, when the weather was good, they would go for 16 hours trekking through this, area, and then they would get in their tent for 8 hours. And then when the weather was bad, they would just stay in the tent all day. So it was this kind of all or nothing approach. And then the second team that they were racing against would march 20 miles every day. And the days where the weather was good, they would go 20 miles, and the guys would look at each other and say, should we keep going? And they'd say, no, we've done our 20 miles. Let's go and relax now, and rest. Relax is probably a strong word, but rest. And then on the bad days, they would do 20 miles. And that second team got there 11 days ahead, and they were the only team to get back alive. And so my mantra, or my kind of reminder to myself, is do your 20-mile march every day. In other words, if you're tired, if you're hungover from time to time, if you're lazy, if you don't feel your best, just water the plants, whatever way that is. It doesn't need to be the perfect day. It doesn't need to be the perfect morning routine. It doesn't need to be, anything crazy. Not every workout needs to be a great workout. You just got to show up for yourself. And as they say, showing up is 80% of the battle. The other mantra I've had for years, it was funny, when I had the gym, we had 3 t-shirts designed, and there was different mantras in each one. The first one was 1% better every day. And that was encouraging the clients to just show up and be a little bit better. And sometimes they say, Pat, physically, I'm tired. I didn't do better today. And I'd say, the fact you're here, that's you getting mentally stronger. That's your 1%. So that was the first one. The second mantra was keep moving forward. And that was the acknowledgement that you're going to have ups and downs in life. Just don't give in. And then the third mantra was be your own hero. And that comes back to stop chasing other people's dreams, stop comparing yourself to other people, and just allow yourself, to live the life you want to live. I was on a retreat once, and on the retreat, they had us write a letter to our 10-year-old self. And we actually had to take out a physical picture of ourselves when we were 10 and really connect with that person and write this letter. And I cried for about 20 minutes looking at the picture of myself, because I recognized just how hard I was on myself at times in my life. And we all are. We're very critical of ourselves. So be your own hero is really about, remember the kid that you were and the aspirations you had and the dreams you had and the possibilities you saw. And don't lose that, because, when you lose that again, you can end up in some miserable places, and life's too short for that.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. Well, what's an accomplishment? So as of recording this, we're in March 2020. What's something that you're looking to achieve this year? What's something that's on the horizon, a project or challenge that you've got going on that you're working towards?
This men's work is very fulfilling to me, and it's something that I was probably intimidated by for a long time, because it was funny, for the first 5-6 years of my career, my audience has been primarily female, 70% female. And, there was a lot of females that would come to seminars and go home and say, Pat said this, and Pat said this, and Pat said this. And the husband would say,
who's this Pat guy?
I don't like this guy. And just whatever way it's gone, the audience has started to shift to 50% of the room now are men. And I have so much admiration for them, because it's guys that are in some cases twice my age. And I really respect their humility and their willingness to come and learn from a young lad. So if I can put rooms of men together and I can share the tools that have been really useful for me, and again, I can make a little dent on that problem that we're having here and we're having globally. I'm 32. I see men even my age around me that are giving up a little bit. They're still living, but they're kind of giving up. Like work has become everything and they're living for the weekend. And I just want to make people believe in themselves. So if the men's work is a big thing for me this year, just helping people reconnect with, something I've been telling guys is you got to stop saying, I want to be the guy I was when I was 25 or I was 30 or I was 20. I've recognized I'm never going to be that guy again that I was 5 years ago. And that's not a problem. I learned when I was that guy and now I'm a new guy, and allow yourself to be the new guy. Stop living on your past and make your future bigger than your past. So that's definitely a big thing for me this year.
Love that. Thank you so much. Well, Pat, it's been a phenomenal interview. I've loved it. I hope you have too. And those that are listening, I hope you've been enjoying this. There's so many nuggets of wisdom that Pat shared with you. So, well, you and me, I love it. So thank you so much, Pat. It's been great to have you on. So the people thinking, do you know what? I know they'll be thinking it because I'm thinking it. This guy, he's such a lovely guy. He's a legend. I'd love to connect with him and learn more from him. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm trying to be an adult now, so I'm using LinkedIn quite a bit, which has been a...
Oh, you've grown up.
Yeah.
Now you're 32.
Yeah. I'm on Instagram. I've got a podcast called the Pat Divilly Podcast. And I'm in London on the 20th of June for a full day workshop called Discovery. And that is, I suppose, really, I'm trying to share, I'm like you. I've read so many books. I've gone on so many courses, and there's been a lot of stuff that's been okay. And then there's the magic stuff that's like the really useful stuff. So I'm trying to just give people the tools that have made a massive impact on my life. Most important thing for me is that I live this stuff and people see me living this stuff every day through my jiu-jitsu, through my personal life. And I want to share those tools. So that's, 20th of June. I'm looking forward to that in London.
20th of June. And you've also got May 16th in Dublin and May 30th in Cork as well, for anyone that might be listening to this that is in Ireland, or maybe thinks that they don't want to wait until the 20th of June. And I think I want to jump over the water. So, seeing as that flights might be cheap at the moment, they can get a good deal. So thank you so much. So guys, if people do have questions, obviously they can connect with you and do all that good stuff and connect with you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'd love to have you come and speak at the Evolve Network at some point. I'm sure we can have a conversation offline about that. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody. Pat, it's been a pleasure, and we'll join you on the new episode very soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.